There was a time when I thought I found my dream girl, the tallest girl I'd ever seen. She sat next to me, talked to me. I thought maybe, just maybe, I had a chance. But what happened next changed the way I saw women forever. So this all takes place in the fall of 2016. My favorite year of all time, by the way. I was 20 years old, and just 9 months previously, I had had my switch where I suddenly went from liking thick, curvaceous, feminine women that looked like fertility goddesses to liking the complete opposite. Super tall, muscular, broad-shouldered women with big hands and feet. And I thought this would open up a whole new world of options for me. So I thought, of course, if I'm a short guy and my extreme height insecurity put me through hell to the point where a switch flipped in my brain and I suddenly started liking the opposite of what was considered conventionally attractive to men, then of course, a tall woman who would have gone through height insecurity similarly would possibly have the same thing happen to her. And boy, I can tell you, I had a lot to learn. And because this whole obsession with tall women was still really fresh in my mind, I had a lot of excitement there surrounding it. And my libido was basically at its all-time peak. And I enjoyed intensifying the experience by denying myself a climax, what I called then edging. And during this fall semester, I had decided to try out No-Fap for about 6 weeks. And it wasn't because I wanted to do a dopamine reset or do any of that red pill crap. It was all because I wanted to enjoy imagining some tall dominatrix denying me pleasure and telling me,
you can't do that.
And to experience how intense my libido could get. Little did I know, this intense energy and libido that I got from No-Fap would end up being my undoing. So this fall semester of 2016, I would actually repeat a microeconomics class that I had failed a year before. And I had failed it because back then I was still in the depths of insecurity, feeling worthless, looking around the classroom, looking at all the tall guys and the couples. And I was just basically in the darkest time of my life at that point, neglected doing the homework, neglected to focus, and I ended up having to take the class again. And I guess it's fate that led me to take it again because that next year, I would be introduced to the most beautiful, towering, blonde-haired, blue-eyed, broad-shouldered goddess I had ever seen in my life, before or since. And she sat right next to me. And yet again, it became so difficult to focus in that class because every few seconds I would be glancing over at her long, extensive legs. She would wear these short shorts, and she could barely fit in this desk. Even sitting down, her head was high above me, and her legs went out to the sides, and her feet, her feet. She always wore open-toed sandals, and she had the longest, largest, most perfect feet I have ever seen in my life. And one of the things I noticed that No-Fap pushed me to do was I felt this overwhelming compulsion to talk to more girls, to ask more girls out, to do everything I could to possibly be able to get laid. And I gotta say, if anybody tries to tell you that No-Fap will make it easier to study and focus in school, they're full of shit. And as we'll learn in this story, it actually makes it very difficult for you to resist saying something creepy that will actually ruin your chances. But to sum it all up, I could not think about anything other than her and her perfect, superior, towering form. And I just knew I had to try my luck, no matter the cost. So at first I would just try with small talk here and there, before class or at the end of class. Just kind of keep it casual, learn a bit about her. But then one day, because we were seated near each other, we got placed in a group together. And because both of us were good students, we were able to finish our group work way earlier than everybody else. And that was when I started to talk to her a little more deeply. Again, I tried to keep it casual, but I just had this hormonal fixation that was just pushing me towards turning the topic of the conversation more towards the things that got me on. But first, I did learn a few things about her. I learned that her mother was from Germany. I learned that her father met her mother on a business trip. And in my mind, there were two things that I learned from that. One is that she's German, so she's genetically superior. And two is that her dad met her mom on a business trip. Of course, her family's probably wealthy because you don't generally see middle-class or lower-class people going on business trips, especially when they're so young that their daughter hasn't even been born yet. So my mind just started going wild. Ooh, oh my, she's tall and rich. Oh, she is the perfect woman for me. Then I learned she plays lacrosse, and that just made me want her even more because all I could think of is her working out every day after school, not only towering over everybody on the team, but getting super buff and strong, dominating the field, playing this manly sport that's like on par with rugby. I mean, it was really hot. Then she starts telling me how she gets good grades and how she's on the dean's list and on the honor roll and in all these advanced classes. And I'm just thinking, you could not get any hotter if you tried. Because at that time, I was starting to piece the puzzle together and connect the dots on my theory of tall people being more likely to come from wealth, being more likely to be smarter, more intelligent, more attractive, etc. And she just fit the bill perfectly. So after I learned all these things about her, I decided to move on to glazing her. I started out by complimenting her intelligence and her academic success, and then adding on top that she's this successful athlete is just incredibly impressive. I wasn't ready to mention anything about the height yet, but I was getting there. But even at this point, things were already getting a little bit awkward. Because one of the things I said was like, you are so incredibly intelligent. I bet all this school stuff is just easy for you. And she said something like,
Well, actually, I had to work really, really hard and study my ass off to get anywhere. Like, this was not easy for me.
and I said something like, yeah, okay. You're smart as hell. I know it wasn't as hard for you as it would be for a lot of other people. And I could tell that she kind of didn't like the fact that I downplayed how hard she worked and more focused on a deterministic reason for why she was so successful, being that she's just genetically superior and just destined to dominate everyone at everything. So it seemed like everything was going pretty smoothly until I said something that I would absolutely regret. Something that turned the conversation completely awkward and was probably one of the biggest mistakes that I've ever made when talking to a girl. So one of the things that fed into my exceptional attraction to this girl was when she said that she was German. And part of the reason for that is back in the 1930s and 40s, there was a certain mustachioed leader, and he had set up this program to enhance the genetic stock of the German people by making sure that only the best of the best passed on their genes, the tallest, the strongest, the most intelligent, the most attractive, etc. And it really hasn't been that long since that took place. And I know it sounds bad, but I just found that to be extremely hot. Just thinking about how she was basically bred to be superior to everyone else, and it clearly showed. And for lack of a better term, I just couldn't keep it, figuratively speaking. So what did I say? I said something along the lines of, oh my God, you are tall, you're intelligent, you're attractive, you're basically mustache man's ideal woman. And I just looked at her and smiled, and she just kind of like cracked a little smile like that, but she didn't really know what to say. And I immediately felt totally stupid because it's like, God, how culturally insensitive can I be? Germans don't want to think about that. They don't want to hear about that. And especially a woman, like what was I thinking? But again, I was just so aroused by the whole scenario that I just felt like I couldn't help myself. And after having done No-Fap for like 4 weeks at that point, so I'm sure you're not surprised to hear, when the next class came, she did not sit next to me anymore. So if you've ever said something dumb to your crush and instantly regretted it, you are not alone. And if you're into brutal short guy stories like this, hit like and subscribe. It really does help more than you think. So back to the story. Yes, she moved to a different spot, but she didn't move across the class. She moved one space up. And instead of sitting directly next to me, she was sitting directly next to the guy in front of me. And he was also a short guy. He wasn't anywhere near as attractive as I was. I did not feel threatened by him at all. But hey, it wasn't all bad. I still had a wonderful view of her from behind. I could now see her broad, powerful shoulders from the back and how they tapered down with her V-shaped lats going down into her narrow hips. She really did have the look of some kind of androgynous superhuman. So even though it wasn't all bad, I was still very discouraged because all I could think about is how much I must have fucked up to make her want to switch a seat at all. And my raging No-Fap hormones were still pushing me and compelling me to come up with my next stage of the plan. And what would that plan be? It would be to catch up with her after class and try to spend a couple minutes talking to her so I could get her phone number. And I just remember being so nervous the whole time in that class. I could not think about what the teacher was saying. My hands were clammy. I was shaking. I was sweating. And every second just felt like an eternity. And when the bell finally rang, she just immediately got up and basically ran out the door as if she was doing everything she could to make it as hard for me as possible to try and talk to her. And looking back, I think that's exactly what she was trying to do. But I made my way through everyone and I caught up to her. And I was like, "Hey, Astrid," that's a good German dominatrix name. "Hey, Astrid, could I speak with you for a minute?" And she said,
Yeah, okay, sure.
and I could immediately tell from her body language and her facial expression that she was very uncomfortable, but she didn't know how to say no. But I still thought, hey, I might be able to salvage this situation. So after beating around the bush for a minute or so, I went ahead and spat out what I had originally planned on saying, which was honestly a big mistake, and it was something fueled by raging teenage No-Fap hormones. I said to her something like, "Hey, Astrid, I know that I'm a lot shorter than you, but I actually find your height to be incredibly beautiful, and I was wondering if I could get your phone number and maybe we could talk and go out sometime." And the way I said it was very weak, very submissive, because I wanted to see myself as weak and submissive to her. I wasn't trying to be dominant and confident and alpha. I was trying to be very soft and sweet and cute. So to my surprise, she actually gave me her phone number that day. That evening, I texted her, and guess what? She never replied. I know, big shocker, right? Turns out a lot of women give phone numbers out to guys they don't like so that they'll leave them alone and then never text them back. So after she didn't reply, I kind of panicked at home. I was dreading the next time I had to come into class. And turns out there was good reason to dread the next time I came into class because things would end up getting a lot worse. The first thing I noticed was that she would no longer come to class early to make sure that I wouldn't have any time to speak with her. And the next thing I noticed actually broke my heart. And that was when she would arrive to class every day, she would arrive with a male friend. And what would she do? She would stand in front of the door to make sure that I could see her, hugging this male friend, getting close to him, talking to him in a very tender way. And finally, after this lengthy hug session with whoever this boyfriend or male friend was, she would come into class right as class was starting and nail the second stake into my heart. This time, she wasn't just sitting one seat in front of where she was before. She had moved to the entire opposite of the classroom, as far away as she possibly could from me. I felt so hurt, so betrayed. Anytime I looked over at her, she would completely avoid eye contact. She would run out of the class the second the bell rang, meet up with her guy friend right after class, hug him in front of me again, just do everything she could to avoid interaction with me. And my self-esteem plummeted. My heart was broken. I felt so brutally humiliated and rejected. And that high libido and arousal turned to self-loathing and anger. I'm a different person now. I would have handled this differently, but back then I was like the definition of a virgin incel with rage. I looked over at her. At first I was just like looking at her like, how could you do this to me, But as it really started to sink in, I started to feel a lot more hatred and anger. And I would never do anything violent, but I would just look at her like, how dare you do this to me? How dare you reject me in such a humiliating, brutal way? And I really did grow to hate her because all I could think about was I had just blown my chance with the absolute perfect ideal woman who fit every aspect of what I want in a female. And I didn't know if I would ever get a chance like that again. And those feelings would turn out right because here we are 8 years later, and after going to a 4-year school, going to the city, traveling to events, seeing thousands upon thousands of women, I have not interacted with a single woman or even seen one that came close to being as perfect for me as she was. Safe to say I gave up on No-Fap because all it ended up doing was distracting me from school and putting me through emotional turmoil. Now you might think that's the end of the story, but you're wrong. There's more to it. Not even 2 weeks later, that fall in late October, we had the worst fire in our city's history. 5% of all the buildings in the city were destroyed. Thousands and thousands of people lost their homes. And the professor of our microeconomics class lost her home. we had to take a week or two off school, and by the time we got back, we had a new professor, and half the class was gone for good. And among those people that were gone was Astrid, and she never came back. And you know what? It was for the best, because without her there, I flourished. I ended that semester with the highest grade in the class. Even so, I was sad because I felt that this perfect girl, I would probably never see her again. Little did I know, I was wrong, because 1 year later, I had moved from the community college to the local 4-year school. And who would I see in the library of that 4-year school but Astrid? She looked worse for wear. She had acne, she was thinner, she had lost muscle. She looked exhausted. And I tried to make eye contact with her. I tried to smile at her. And I think that she did see me and notice me, but she still thought that I was a creepy stalker freak because she, again, continued to absolutely avoid all eye contact and interaction. Now, seeing her in such a sorry state, part of me felt vindicated, like, yeah, it's what you get, you know. But then the guilt started to creep in. You know, what if she lost everything in that fire? It's a very big possibility. You know, especially if her family was wealthy or upper class, they would have lived in the hills nearby, and that area was the area hardest hit by the fires. And I have a lot of sympathy for anybody who has to go through that. So what lesson did I learn from all this? Well, if we would have met today, things absolutely would have gone differently. Because I am much more charismatic now. I know what to say and what not to say, but I still think she probably would have rejected me, but who knows, you know? She was very friendly with that short guy in front of me, and her guy friend that she would hug outside, he was also pretty short too. So, you know, I might have had a chance if I wouldn't have completely fucked it up. Now, you might think that No-Fap helps you unlock the secret to getting girls. And, you know, it does push you through the fear, and it gives you the motivation you need to go ahead and ask them out. But the problem is that it induces a state of extreme lust and obsession that can lead to behavior that comes off as very stalkerish and can be non-conducive to the results that you're actually looking for. And it can make you especially nervous if the woman that you like has such an extreme power dynamic over you that she could break all your bones and strangle you to death with her bare hands if she wanted to. I'd like to know your guys' thoughts on the core reason why I was rejected by this girl. Do you think it was all down to the height difference and she never would have wanted me no matter what? Was it the timing of what I said? Or was it all just down to I just said the wrong thing? And if you've got your own brutal rejection story, I would love to hear about it down in the comments. And if you're interested in another brutal black pill short guy story, check out this one over here about the time my favorite radio show host ever said something that would destroy my self-esteem for the rest of my life.